Imagine a world where the United States never entered World War II. The iconic image of American troops landing on foreign beaches never materializes. The Lend-Lease Act remains a theoretical measure rather than a lifeline to allied nations. The geopolitical landscape of the 20th century would be unrecognizably different. Today, we explore the profound consequences of an America that chose isolation over intervention in the global conflict that defined a generation. By 1940, the United States had witnessed the rise of totalitarian regimes in Europe and Asia with a cautious eye. President Franklin D. Roosevelt faced intense domestic pressure to remain neutral, reflecting a population scarred by the memories of World War I and eager to avoid entanglement in another foreign war. The America First Committee, a vocal advocacy group, captured the sentiment of millions, promoting the idea that the Western Hemisphere must remain secure and that foreign conflicts were best left to Europe and Asia to resolve on their own. Had Roosevelt adhered strictly to isolationist policies, the first significant consequence would have been the limited material support to nations under threat. The Lend-Lease Act, enacted in 1941, provided billions in aid to Britain, the Soviet Union, and China. Without this assistance, Britain's capacity to resist the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain would have been severely constrained. Aircraft, tanks, and crucial supplies might have been rationed more stringently, forcing Britain to negotiate from a position of relative weakness rather than strategic resilience. The United Kingdom could have faced more prolonged and severe wartime shortages, weakening civilian morale and industrial production. Across the Atlantic, Nazi Germany's strategic calculations would have shifted dramatically. Without the looming threat of American industrial and military power, Hitler may have accelerated his campaigns in Eastern Europe. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, relied on the assumption that the Soviets could be contained and that resources would not be as freely available from Western allies. In a scenario where the United States remains disengaged, Germany could have extended its campaigns deeper into Soviet territory before facing significant resistance. Cities and industrial centers in the Western Soviet Union may have experienced greater disruption, potentially altering the trajectory of the Eastern Front and prolonging the conflict in Eurasia. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, the absence of American naval power would have created a strategic vacuum. Japan's imperial ambitions in East Asia, already evident through its occupation of Manchuria and subsequent advances into China, would have encountered less resistance. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in this scenario may never have occurred, simply because there would have been no direct American threat to provoke. Japanese expansion across Southeast Asia, including the resource-rich territories of the Dutch East Indies, could have proceeded with minimal interference. The broader regional balance of power would have shifted decisively in favor of Japan, consolidating its influence over vital shipping lanes and natural resources. Economically, the United States' decision to remain neutral would have had profound effects on its own development. The war effort of 1941 to 1945 spurred unprecedented industrial growth, particularly in manufacturing, aerospace, and technological research. Without this stimulus, the pace of American innovation could have been slower, delaying the country's rise as a global superpower. Conversely, the U.S. might have maintained stronger trade relations with both Axis and allied nations, navigating a delicate balance of neutrality while attempting to protect economic interests abroad. The social implications within the United States would also have been significant. World War II catalyzed major demographic shifts, including increased urbanization, the integration of women into the industrial workforce, and migration patterns reshaped by defense production centers. Without the mobilization for war, these changes may have been delayed or taken entirely different forms. The momentum behind civil rights movements, which gained urgency from the wartime experience of African American soldiers and laborers, might have progressed more slowly in a peacetime economy. Politically, the isolationist stance could have altered the post-war world order dramatically. The United Nations, conceived as a framework for collective security, emerged directly from the cooperation of allied powers, including the U.S. A non-interventionist America may have undermined the creation of a strong international institution capable of mediating conflicts, leaving Europe and Asia to rebuild under the influence of regional powers rather than a globally coordinated effort. The absence of American leadership could have allowed Soviet and German spheres of influence to expand unchecked, potentially setting the stage for a more fragmented and volatile international system. Consider the technological and scientific landscape. During World War II, the Manhattan Project, radar advancements, and jet propulsion research all accelerated in the context of American military involvement. A strictly isolationist U.S. might have continued such research in limited or purely defensive contexts, slowing the pace of breakthroughs that later defined the nuclear age, aviation, and computing. European powers, war-weary and resource-strapped, may have lacked the industrial capacity to achieve similar technological milestones independently, reshaping global innovation timelines for decades. The hypothetical aftermath in Europe is perhaps the most striking. Without American intervention, Germany's position would have been considerably stronger in the early 1940s. A protracted war with the Soviet Union might have exhausted both nations, but without a Western front opening up with American and British forces landing in France, Germany could have retained control over significant portions of Europe for a longer period. The eventual collapse of Nazi power might have been delayed, possibly allowing Germany to negotiate a more favorable settlement or maintain partial hegemony across the continent. For the Soviet Union, the absence of U.S. support would have increased dependence on domestic production and regional resources. The immense human and material costs of resisting German advances would have intensified. This strain could have reshaped Soviet society, potentially influencing post-war political dynamics and internal policies. The long-term consequences for Eastern Europe could have been profound, with altered borders, governments, and spheres of influence reflecting a European continent that was less stabilized by Allied coordination. Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan's dominance in the Pacific might have become virtually uncontested. British, Dutch, and French colonial possessions could have experienced prolonged occupation, altering post-war independence movements and regional politics. The eventual reassertion of Western influence in Asia might have been delayed by decades, reshaping modern geopolitical alliances and economic patterns. Culturally, the memory of the war within the United States would have taken a different form. The narrative of the arsenal of democracy, the heroism of American soldiers, and the unifying national effort that defined the 1940s would not have existed in the same way. American identity, forged in part through the experience of wartime mobilization, may have leaned more heavily toward isolationist ideals, cautious engagement with foreign conflicts, and prioritization of domestic stability over global leadership. Interestingly, the decision to remain isolationist might have also influenced the Cold War's trajectory. The absence of U.S. military and economic power in post-war Europe could have allowed the Soviet Union to consolidate its influence more broadly. Eastern Europe may have expanded further westward in a sphere of control, while Western European nations, lacking American support through initiatives like the Marshall Plan, might have struggled to rebuild economically. The ideological and geopolitical divide that defined the second half of the 20th century could have been both sharper and more unpredictable. It is also worth considering the long-term consequences for international law and human rights. The United States' involvement in World War II played a significant role in establishing norms for war crimes tribunals and the prosecution of crimes against humanity. Without direct engagement, the mechanisms for addressing such issues might have been weaker, leaving a more fragmented approach to justice and accountability in the post-war era. Ultimately, a non-interventionist America would have produced a world fundamentally different in its political, economic, and social structures. Germany and Japan may have extended their influence. Europe and Asia could have experienced prolonged instability, and the United States itself might have emerged as a wealthy but less globally influential nation. The moral, ethical, and humanitarian lessons drawn from the global conflict would have been absorbed differently, filtered through observation rather than direct participation. This alternate history scenario also encourages reflection on the delicate balance of choice and circumstance. The decisions of policymakers, the influence of public opinion, and the unpredictable dynamics of war all underscore how contingent history can be. While it is impossible to predict with certainty every outcome of an American isolationist policy, it is clear that the trajectory of the 20th century would have been profoundly altered, politically, economically, and socially, shaping a world in which the United States remained a powerful observer rather than an active participant in global affairs. By imagining a world where the U.S. stayed out of World War II, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complex interplay between domestic policy, international responsibility, and historical contingency. The ripples of inaction, as much as those of engagement, remind us that history is not merely a series of inevitable events, but a web of decisions, opportunities, and consequences that continue to resonate through time. In conclusion, the United States' choice to intervene in World War II was not just a military decision. It was a defining moment that shaped the modern world. Had the nation remained isolationist, the balance of power, the pace of technological advancement, and the very structure of international relations might have been radically different. History, in this scenario, serves as both a mirror and a warning. The paths not taken are as instructive as those chosen, revealing the profound impact of engagement, commitment, and global responsibility.